Matthew chapter 6, verses 1 to 4. Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people, in order to be seen by them. For then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. Thus, when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret, and your Father, who sees in secret, will reward you.
Good morning, church. My social media feed lately has just been politics and videos of people freaking out on airplanes. And sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between the two. But the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, has been tracking that the incidence of air rage, it's like road rage, but people freaking out on planes, it's been steadily growing. There's a fun graph behind me showing violent incidents towards crew members on flights. This isn't even just losing your temper. This is physically harming someone. There was a slight increase in 2021, stressful time to travel. You can see where they implemented their zero tolerance policy and things just kept going up. They did their best. That's besides the point. But even after 2021, it still grows around 20% a year. Air rage grows at around 20% a year. It's not going anywhere. There was a fun study done at Princeton University, and they predicted and confirmed that one of the things that predicts and causes air rage is actually physical inequality on flights. If there's a flight that has a first class and an economy class, people are more likely to enact in air rage. Not only the people sitting at the back and watching everyone up front with all their towels and their champagne, but even first-class passengers are also more likely to be unruly when there's physical inequality in place. We see this, we don't like how it makes us feel. Different study was done where people were asked, would you rather make $50,000 a year, but all your friends make $25,000, okay, so you make double, or would you rather make $100,000, but all your friends make $200,000. And most people chose they would take the 50. They'd rather make less but have twice as much as all of their friends. Why do I say all this? Situations can stir up our pride, and pride makes us do dumb things. Yeah, no one disagrees with that. Okay, we're good. Even throughout Christian history, you can look at the Desert Fathers, these monks in Egypt, and they talked about the sin of vainglory, the sin of pride, as the greatest sin. And you can jump even up until, you look at C.S. Lewis during World War II. He was doing some public addresses on the radio, and he said this, as long as you are proud, you cannot know God. A proud man is always looking down on things and people. And of course, as long as you're looking down, you cannot see something that is above you. In our current section on the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus is going to show how pride can ruin good things in the life of a Christian. He's going to talk about 3 different religious practices. Today, we're talking about giving, then he's going to talk about prayer, and then he's going to talk about fasting and how these good things in the Christian life can be twisted, poisoned, perverted by pride. So let's get to it. Jesus says right at the outset, kind of the nature of giving, what is giving in and of itself. And we're not getting into the nitty-gritties of giving and money today. He's actually talking about our heart posture when we give. He takes it for granted. He says, when you give, do not do it like, and he goes on and on and on and on in these different ways. And he's referring to, in the original language, it says, when you do your acts of mercy. This was not the regular giving. There were 3 different tithes that God's people had to perform. This was outside of that. When you're doing an act of mercy, our word charity comes from the word caritas, which is a word for love. When you're doing a spontaneous, in-the-moment response to a need that you see, and he says, don't do it like this. He says, do it this way instead. And when we talk about money, we all get some heebie-jeebies. Why are they talking about money in church so much? Jesus talks about money more than anything else. 15% of his teachings are on money. About 30% of his parables are on money. Timothy Keller noted, if pastors preached as much on money as Jesus did, no one would come. We're not really talking about giving in and of itself today. It's a heart posture. But while we're here, I just want to say two things, two quick reminders that are good for Christians to know as we give. First, God doesn't need your money. Second, we are commanded to give. It's a paradox. It's not a contradiction. God doesn't need your money, and yet you are commanded to give. God doesn't need your money. He created all of the universe, the cosmos, and he sustains it to this day on a $0 budget. They're not looking at the numbers saying, Holy Spirit, are we in the black this quarter? We can expand the kingdom of heaven. Not as much as we would like, but it's progress. Not at all. He doesn't need a thing. He lacks nothing. He is all power, wisdom, knowledge, love, presence. Doesn't need it. So when he says you must give, he's telling to us, though, we're commanded to have hearts that are free from the love of money. We are to give as we see needs. We're to use our money to know God and to love others. You will either use your money, what am I saying? We will use our things to love people, or we will use people to love things. These are the two options. So as God's people, we're commanded to use this. And even economically, one of the functions of money is that it is a placeholder of value. A $20 bill is a placeholder for $20 worth of value. If I give you the bill, $20 is exchanged here. It's a placeholder of value, and we use our money to show what we value. And even when we're giving it away, we can still be showing what we value in the right way or the wrong way. Simple enough. So Jesus will first address this issue of giving by saying how not to give. What's the way we ought not do it? And he says this in verse 2. He says, "Thus, when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward." Now, were there literal trumpets being sounded? I found no consensus historically in the commentaries, but we can understand the picture here of people that are giving publicly so that they may be seen and celebrated, simply enough. And he says this is what the hypocrites do. Hypocrite is the term from Greek theater, and it means someone who speaks from behind a mask. And it makes sense on stage to be a hypocrite because you're pretending to be something you're not. But he says when it comes to the Christian life, the religious life, this is not a good thing. This is not the same thing. He quotes the book of Isaiah when he says in Matthew 15:8, "These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me." He says you can be doing the right external behaviors and your heart can still be in the wrong place. He talks about this in the parable of the prodigal son. He calls it the parable of the two brothers. There's two brothers, two sons. The younger son is doing externally all of the wrong things. He leaves home, he blows all his money, he parties it away. But the older son, he stays home and he does all the right stuff. He stays near dad, he does what dad says, he does the work. And Jesus is showing that both of these sons are distant from the heart of the Father. And both of them make the mistake to assume that their external behavior is the indicator of their right standing with the Father. Their physical proximity is not an indicator of their relational proximity. He says, you who are near, you who are far, you who've done all the right things your whole life, you who've done all the wrong things your whole life, neither of these are what earn your right standing with the Father. It's a thing of the heart. So he says, don't do it in this way, because when you give in this way to draw attention to yourself, performing for all the others, being a hypocrite, you get your payment in full. He says, truly I say to you, they have received their reward. And that means to settle an account. He says, you got what you wanted. You wanted to be seen by others? All right, that's all you get. And he's going to show that that's not the proper reward. That's not the proper completion. That's not what the purpose of giving is for. This is not what you should be looking to receive in this way, because it's pointing attention back to you. Why is that a problem? I learned this the hard way a few years ago. Becca and I used to live downtown, not in the nicest area. There was just a lot of people wrestling with substance abuse of various forms. And so I was walking the block, and a man came up to me and said, hey, can you give me some money? I want to go buy some food. And I was unsure if he was going to buy food with this money. So I said, hey, let's go to the grocery store and I will buy you whatever you want. And he said, no, just give me the money now. I'll do it myself. I said, hey, It's not going to happen. I'll come with you. We don't need to go to the ATM. We'll save time. Let's do this, whatever you want. He said, no, give me the money. But I'm blessed with the gift of stubbornness with a smile. And I said, no, I'll buy you whatever you want. And we went back and forth. He said, fine. That's what he did. And so we went into the store and I said, do you want some eggs? Do you want some bread? Do you want some apples? He grabbed 2 jugs of pop jugs, 2 liters, slammed them on the counter. I paid for them. And he grunted and just took them and walked out. And I was clutching at my pearls. I was offended. He was not appreciative at all. And that indicated to me that I didn't know in the moment I was expecting some kind of thanks, but when I didn't get it, I didn't get my reward, I was disappointed. My ego was a little bit bruised. And I didn't say it, but we would think to ourselves, well, I'm not going to do that again. I was expecting a certain type of reward. And I didn't get it. My expectations were subverted. And that even illustrated that I was going after the wrong thing. I was expecting some kind of thanks from the guy. Jesus says, you'll get what you want, but that's it. And it's not what it was meant for. Okay, this raises the question, what is the real reward? What should we be seeking after? And he says this, how to give. He'll say this, but when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. It's interesting now because he's going to internalize this. He's going to say, even when you give, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. The right hand was the active hand. That's kind of what you did your stuff with. And so when you gave the gift, it was probably with your right hand. So if your left hand isn't involved, it doesn't need to know. Even internally, you don't need to focus on this or dwell on this. It's kind of the pattern he's been making throughout the Sermon on the Mount, the internalization of the law. He goes through the 10 Commandments. He says, you've heard it said, do not murder. Great, I say unto you, if you hate your brother in your heart, you've committed the same thing. I say, you've heard it said, do not commit adultery. I say unto you, if you lust after a woman, you've committed adultery with her with your heart. Okay? So don't do grand public proclamations when you give, but if you're even still congratulating yourself inside, this act of mercy is metastasizing into an act of vanity. You're still seeking praise and reward. You're just kind of getting it from yourself if you can't get it from others. And he says that's also not it. He says that, what am I talking about? He says, your Father who sees in secret will reward you. So if the reward shouldn't be external praise, and if the reward shouldn't be internal praise, what is the reward? What's the thing he's getting at? The thing we should be seeking above all these other things, about even my own self-satisfaction or praise from others. What is the reward? And we can pause here, because you might think, well, isn't that a little bit contradictory or hypocritical? Shouldn't a Christian just delight in doing the right thing? We shouldn't be seeking a reward when we give. Isn't this just exchanging one type of vanity for another? But there's a difference in getting a prize for something versus the actual natural completion of an action. This is kind of complex. C.S. Lewis says in his sermon, The Weight of Glory, the proper rewards are not simply tacked onto the activity for which they are given, but are the activity itself in consummation. Some rewards are the natural fulfillment, and some things are tacked on. So consider a young man pursuing a woman. If you're just pursuing this woman for her money, that would seem like an improper reward. He's just going after her for her money. We would say, well, that doesn't seem to be the proper end of pursuing someone. But if I am pursuing this person, if I'm pursuing this woman because I want greater union with her, I want greater intimacy with her, then marriage would be the proper consummation and the reward of this. It's the completion. It's what it's pointing to in the first place. So yeah, you're not going to get a sticker from Jesus if you give in that way. What is the reward then? What is the reward of all these things Jesus has been talking about in the Sermon on the Mount? In the Beatitudes, he talks about the nature of blessing, the nature of the good life. And he says, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. We could imagine this. Blessed are those who give and no one knows. He says in Matthew 5:8, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. And in Acts 20:35, he's quoted as saying, "It is more blessed to give than to receive." So in all of these things, when you are persecuted for righteousness, when you're reviled for his name, when you're making peace, when you're giving unto others, what are you seeing? You're seeing more of God. You're seeing more of his kingdom. You're actually getting a peek behind the inner workings of the kingdom, the fabric of reality itself. Look at the highest level or the lowest level of all things. Look at the Trinity, God himself. He's one being in three persons, and they exist in this outward-facing matrix of pouring themselves out and giving themselves to each other. And from this overflows the life of the world, creation itself. And God makes man and woman to exist in relationship, in this outward-facing relationship, giving of themselves, and from this overflows new life. And that's the family. And if you've got kids, you're giving yourself to them. You're pouring yourself out on them. And they're not giving you much back in return. And this will overflow for the life of the world in this way. This is the nature of the kingdom of heaven. The currency, the language of the kingdom is blessing. The currency is generosity. And so when I give, I'm seeing more of who God is. I'm walking in the nature of the kingdom, and I'm showing the world more of his nature. Because here's the truth, my friends. We're all restless. We're anxious. We're unhappy. And the illusion is that I need to fill myself with things to feel more whole. I need to fill myself with comfort or power or reputation or possessions or money, and then I will feel full. And we see the opposite in the kingdom of heaven, that when we give of ourselves, when we give what we have, I'm seeing the heart of God. If I was made to know him, if I was made by him, for him, to image him and to show him in the world, then I am acting as he does in this selfless giving. And that's where I find where I make space for him to know himself in me. He says it's greater to give than to receive. And when I give, not only am I seeing God's heart, I'm making him look great. If I say, I will give away all that I have so that I can have more of him, that's what makes God look great. If we're willing to give up everything, that's where I find my greatest flourishing, my greatest satisfaction, my greatest sanctification, and that's how I show him to the world. That's what we have. That's your sanctification. That's your apologetics. That's your worship, all three in one. We are walking in the nature of this new thing that Jesus is coming to restore in this way. That is the reward when we give. If it was anything else, it would kind of be idolatry. Anything else but God himself. If it wasn't God, if it was some other thing, then I should be pursuing that other thing and not God. But if I'm walking with him, I find the purpose which I was made for. I get to see more of him. I get to show him as all satisfying, and I get to show him to the world. Now, for us here today, we hear this, and it's a simple truth, but it's challenging because these are areas of our heart that we're not always aware of. So we reflect on this. First question is simply, where is God calling you to give? Where is God calling you to give? This isn't your regular giving. I hope you're giving regularly, but these are acts of mercy. Moments of love, seeing a need and responding to it in your life. Where do you see this? And we can rationalize things to ourselves. Well, I don't always want to give money because I don't know what they're going to do with it. There's a big difference between exercising good judgment and being judgmental. There's a difference between stewardship and snobbery. So in the moment, okay, maybe you think in this moment I see someone asking, maybe I don't want to give them money straight up. Well, could you pray with them? Could you talk with them? Maybe you could buy them some food. In some moments, I felt led to actually give money to someone who was asking. I felt God put it on my heart, and I thought, okay, well, my job is just to respond in this moment to give, and they will be accountable for God's provision in their life. But where you are, with your time, your talent, your treasure, you might think, I'm broke, I'm a student, or I'm just old. I got things to do, I got bills to pay. What else do you have? What has God given you? Where is he inviting you to act and respond with mercy and with love in your circumstances? Secondly, and this is the harder question, what do I want when I give? What do I want when I give? Maybe you're like me, where I kind of look in my heart and I do these acts of mercy and I see God's heart and I respond. I just flourish in it. But I also see part of myself that kind of wants, a little bit of recognition. I see this in my own heart. I feel like the centurion. I pray, God, I believe, help my unbelief. God, I want to want you more than this, more than my own pride, more than my own comfort. And this is kind of the role of discipleship. This is where God's Spirit is illuminating these things to us in love. It's loving of Him to show us where we're still not walking in full freedom. And the Spirit begins to invite us into this life that Jesus has for us, the heart of the kingdom. He invites us into these things. He shows us more of the beauty of His Son, more of the gospel. The God who so loved the world that He gave His only Son, gave Him free gift so that we could have this free gift of newness of life. God, I want to walk in this. Help me walk into this more. What do I want when I give? When we see these things, do we even want to want this? The desire for grace is the beginning of grace, as Augustine would say. What's God revealing to our hearts today? Would you close your eyes with me? Let's just approach the Lord. Ask His Spirit to begin to reveal these things to us. First, God, where would you have us serve as your people? Where have you placed us? In our neighborhoods, our commutes to work, our workplace? How have you equipped us to be your hands and feet, to show people more of who you are? Would you reveal this to us? And secondly, as we respond in faith, would you be showing us where we are not fully seeing and savoring the glory of your Son? And by faith, would your Spirit just be working out these knots in our soul, showing us where we can open up our hands, we can walk in greater freedom, for this is where we will find our truest comfort and provision. God, forgive us, because it's so comfortable to amass our own possessions. It's so comfortable to control. But would you show us that we are no less in control of things when we have all the money in the world and when we don't? That you are the God who is sovereign. You are the God who provides. You uphold all things by your power. And would we be faithful to follow you as you lead us in greater steps and stages of life. And Father, as we approach your table for communion together, help us to celebrate this great gift. Help us to receive it again. Remind us of the joy of our salvation. And would we be sent from this place today as people filled with your sacrificial love who model this for the life of the world. We ask all this in your Son's name. Amen.